episode. I was supposed to do this about a week and a half ago, and my computer decided to go, no, we're not. We're doing this today. So we're doing this today. This is Lydia Laurenson. She's a freelance writer, an EIC editor in chief. She's got this cool little thing called New Modality. Just definitely check that out, folks. If you guys want to see some really cool concepts and ideas about what the world could possibly be. But I mean, today, right before we started, we were talking about the fact that she's also just recently a newborn mom. So congratulations! And how I almost don't want to repeat this, but how are things going today?
I was just saying before we started the show that I'm pretty tired because I last had night support on Saturday, so it's been a couple nights of not having night support, which is a little intense. It means a lot of waking up at sort of random intervals and feeding him. But uh, today's pretty good. Someone showed up at my door with breakfast, which was kind of amazing. I was like a little strung out by the time I woke up this morning. And that person just like magically showing up was amazing. So that like helped. And the baby's good. He's healthy.
Yeah, and that's the important thing. And like I said, you have given up on sleep for the foreseeable future, but that is life, and that is how it goes, right?
Yep.
If it's not too personal, what's his name?
Alexander.
Alexander. Cool. So that is congratulations on everything. This is Jag. Hi, Jag.
Hi, Jag. In the chat.
Yeah, see right there. She's also a freelance writer and of her own sorts. So definitely check her out. This is Lydia. She's not just a freelancer. So I gotta ask this then, because I mean, now that you got this, so you've been doing your own, like you've been building your own little empire, quote unquote, for the last 2 years. How's it you gonna balance that now?
For a longer time than that. I mean, before I started New Modality, I was freelance for a long time. I kind of went in and out of like the tech and media startup world.
Mm-hmm.
So before that, I was a freelance writer and I was doing a lot of like activism and public health work, and I served in the Peace Corps. But yeah, so I'm 38 now. So I've been kind of freelancing as a writer, and I went to college early and I graduated early. So I've been freelancing as a writer for almost 20 years. And then I started doing other types of sort of consulting work, like I guess 10-ish years ago. It's kind of wild to think about it now, but 20 years ago, the internet wasn't really a thing.
No.
Right. And so I was like really interested in the internet. I was like, hey, this thing called the internet is really interesting. And it's so funny in retrospect. It was like I would like apply to like publishing courses and stuff, and they would be like, what are your interests? And they would have all these, like when I was like 20, right?
Yes.
They would have all these interests that were like print, whatever. And I would be like, I'm really interested in the internet. And they would be like, who are you? And so my first freelance writing job was actually I was lucky enough to intern for my very favorite game company, White Wolf Game Studio, which made a couple of, yeah, do you know them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That would have been a lot of fun.
It was really cool. Yeah. I mean, I felt super, oh man, Jagtress in the chat.
Yeah, no.
Awesome.
It like I said, we know of these people. Yes. So
yeah, White Wolf is really cool. I mean, so I was a huge fan of their games, right? Like one of the first RPGs I ever looked at was Changeling the Dreaming. So I had this whole story from when I was a teenager. Again, I was really into the internet, and like it wasn't like a normal thing to be into in the 90s. And so when I was like a sophomore in high school, I had this whole funny thing happen where I was like really interested in MUDs, multi like player online games, and tabs.
I actually built
like you built one.
I built a mini MUD in college.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean it wasn't very good, but I took this was back in the days of C++.
Oh,
So
wow.
you had to
Yeah.
build. You had to build. Obviously, the linear stuff there in comparison to today is so different, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, like I get why MUDs are popular because it's just fun like to create them as well as to play them because it's like
Yeah.
MUDs are the original choose your own adventure on the internet. Like that's what they actually
Yeah.
are. I mean, for all we could pretend it's something else, but really that's what it is. It's that and creating
Well,
them's
and some of
fun.
them had these like amazing internet communities. Like I feel like that part, I really miss that part. Like that was so cool. And that was kind of, yeah, I feel like I did a lot of like self-development and like personal development in Mud starting when I was like 11 or something, which was when America Online went unlimited. There was like this, I think it was like October 1996, America Online goes
Oh,
unlimited. And it has
oh yeah.
AOL. And so I'm
So
like, I go from never spending any time on the internet to spending all of my time on the internet.
yeah, no, it's interesting because I was in high school. Like I was in high school when when that was going on, and we were taking
Mm-hmm.
all these courses we would think would go into the future. So I was dabbling with everything. I still build my web pages on Notepad. This is
Oh
like from
man.
my yeah yeah. So it's the reason why is because of all I learned back in the day. Oh, you can just do it in a Notepad, and you can still just do it
Mm-hmm.
in Notepad. Just no one does it anymore because I'm old and shit. But no, ironically, by going to the community aspect for just a second, um,
Mm-hmm.
Twitch is kind of that place now, whether you
I've
realize it
heard
or
that. Yeah,
well,
I
no.
don't really use Twitch, but
So Twitch is very much a video game community. Now, honestly, if you want to look at fandoms in general, the best fandoms are still in video games. They still are. It's not that has not changed for decades, right? Tabletops have a very loyal fan base, but there's a tendency that like I think just by the nature of tabletops, there's small and insulated communities. But video games, right, because of Twitch, because of things like that, hey, you remember when this game ruled and people will still oh, we're not saying there's another. Hey, this is not a video game channel, Jack. I know this, right? The, but from a fandom perspective, right? Like Discord and right and Twitch very much feel like those old where all these old communities are. I mean, you can try Reddit, but Reddit is everybody says like Twitter and Facebook are the dumpster fires of social media. No, that is actually Reddit, and they just no one talks about it,
I
right?
love all these things. I don't care what anyone says. I
No, no,
still,
no.
yeah.
There's useful. There are okay. Twitter is the best place to go for journalism today. It's
Mm-hmm.
honestly the best place. It's not the news. It's Twitter because you can look up algorithms and go, this is what's really going on in real time. You're an activist. You want to see what's going on in the world. What's really going on in the world. You can literally look it up minute by minute by minute if you want to on Twitter. There's nothing like it. Facebook has its uses too. It's got other really cool aspects to it. Now, that said, there's pros and cons to all of these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Reddit, if Twitter disappeared tomorrow, Reddit would be where journalism's done, right?
That's
Right?
interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think there is some cool journalism that ends up getting done on Reddit, but it is true that it's not. Yeah, I like. It's funny. I've had some people have described me as a quote unquote media polymath because I like tend to sort of have a lot of exposure to different types of media and social media. And I did a bunch of work a few years ago for like years on end, just trying to figure out like what we know about social media in terms of its impact on society, like what we actually can demonstrate, what is like there's a lot of narratives out there about what it is and what it's doing. And then there's like actual research that you can cite and like different expertise that you can pull on. And definitely one of my things that I want to do with the new modality in the future at some point is develop more of like a custom digital platform for it because like I care
Yes.
so much about like really healthy online environments and online conversations. And a lot of that comes from like my early exposure to muds and also the blogosphere in like the aughts. Like there were, it's like there are examples of these time periods where you have these like little corners of the internet where there's these really healthy communities and people are developing these really awesome relationships, and there's like real stuff going on there, and I want to like innovate on that. And so I sort of, it's like you introduced me as like a writer and an editor, and those are definitely things that I am, but a lot of the time I'm also describing myself as sort of like a digital strategist or something. And a lot of yeah, someone in the chat is saying best of luck. I know. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard. Like yeah, I think about it all the time, and I feel like I've only very slowly moved on what needs to happen. But it's so important. Like if we can develop sort of better conversations and healthier online relationships, I think that'll make a big difference. That will like really help things. I also like think a lot about, I'm really into these days, I'm really into spirituality and stuff. And I'm really interested in like expressing that sort of thing, like awe and beauty and like spiritual connection on social media, right? I think of it almost as like an art form. Like it's not just the publication or the writing, it's the platform. The platform is an art.
Absolutely.
So those are some of the things that I think about and that I want to work on in my career. But your question was, how am I going to like fit that in with having a child? And it's a good question. I haven't fully figured that out yet. A lot of my pregnancy was really complex because my engagement like suddenly fell apart in the middle of my pregnancy. So I wasn't like planning to be a single mom. So that's been really like hard and complicated and intense. And I have had a lot of conversations with my community where people, and like past supporters of my projects, especially the new modality, where people are like, hey, like we believe in you, we think you can still do this, like
Yeah.
and people like offer to send me money and like all this stuff. And so I'm like basically getting ready to give it another go, but it's going to be wild to like do this entrepreneurship thing while also having a baby. That's going to be really, really, really intense.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
Again, you are not sleeping for 2 years. That is not a joke, right?
well, you can
But
hire night support, so there's that.
yeah, but okay. I mean, this is I think the real balance you're gonna strike is this: you need to make money, you need to support your kid, and you have your own goals, which is laudable. But you're also, I mean, there is something to be said about wanting to raise your kid at least a little bit yourself, right? Somewhere in all of this, right? Right? So, oh, absolutely. It can be done. It definitely can be done. But the biggest
That's a good
challenge you're gonna
story. I
have
also
it.
think of J.K. Rowling because apparently she was a single mom. I don't know if you knew this.
Oh yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah,
J.K. Rowling was a single mom.
there's
Yeah,
like these stories about her like going to cafes and writing out the
that's
ideas for
that.
Harry Potter like on napkins. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think she wrote one of the drafts in like something like this. Not quite this.
Mhm.
This is a planner, but an actual like journal size thing like this, right? You can the one thing about life I've learned is that if you want to really find a way to do it, it will come to you eventually, right? I'm taking I actually want to take this podcast legitimately on the road. That's the next thing. Like I want to secretly be a rock star, so or not so secretly be a rock star, but I can't sing, but I have a big mouth, so I figure I can actually like go and meet people like yourself in their locations or something similar, like do kind of like a travel log kind of thing, but also interview just amazing people doing amazing things, right? I think there's something that can be done there. Now, getting all the pieces of that together, that's what I'm working on right now, so that by the summer I'm ready to go, right? I'm looking at how to make this happen. Now, I may meet resistance, I may meet obstacles along the way, but at the end of the day, if I really want to make this happen, it will. Or something even cooler will come along. One or the other. Like, that's how this life works. Something comes along, right? Whether you realize it or not, but you got to put the effort and you got to be like, okay, I will do this. And that may sound like power, positive thinking kind of stuff, but really, it's the difference. Is you find a you it, it's not the most talented. It's not what you've accomplished. It's the fact that you're like, I'm gonna go forward and I'm gonna fucking do this. You can swear
Yeah,
on
you
my
keep
show, but
going.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I know. I had this really amazing moment this year, soon around the time that my engagement was broken. And obviously, I'm like pregnant and I'm totally panicked. I'm like, oh my God, what is going to happen? And I was visiting a spiritual center here in the Bay Area, which is called the Alembic. I really like it. It has a lot of cool stuff going on. And I found this card on one of the shelves. It was just like a postcard size card with art on it. And it said obstacles or detours in the right direction.
Yes.
And it was such a funny moment because I would like bring this card out into the main space at the Alembic, and I'm like, hey, I found this card. Like, does anyone know where it came from? And someone was like, someone who knew my situation was like, that has your name on it. They were like, you found that because you were supposed to find that. You should take it home. And it was just
Yes.
like so funny. And like great. I actually still have it in my purse.
Well, it's cool. My quote from the last 3 years has been fear is a door. And on the other side of that, is what you want. Most of us, okay, like I have learned that the things I really care about are the things I get really scared about. Right? It's like, oh shit, well, what's gonna happen next? Well, if I look at it and I look at it as a reason to stop me, right? I would knock yourself out, Jack. Right? If you're gonna looking for a reason to stop me, then fear's a prison. But if I look at it the other way, well, what I want's behind that door, and the reason why I got this feeling in my chest is because it's there and I don't know what's going to happen next, right? Well, I'm going to open the door and kind of see what it is. So now it's no longer a prison. It's a doorway to whatever it is in front of me. Um, and like I said, I've been freelancing now for about 3 years. The first year was I don't learning how to not fuck it up. Like that getting out of that attitude, it's like I can make a living doing this. That was year 2. And this is year
Mhm.
3. So year 3, it's like, okay, I gotta get to full-fledged fucking living with this shit. So how do I do that? Right. Right. So and
Yeah.
that's pretty much it. It's like, but it's been a gradual growth process. So
It's so real. Yeah, figuring out how to do it as a freelancer. I mean, it took me a long time. Like it depends on when you count from because I was definitely in and out of like jobs and I was in the Peace Corps in my early 20s and like I was doing all these other things, but
sure.
and I tried everything. Like I did so many different things. I did blogging, I did self-publishing. Um
Yep.
I worked in tech. I like freelanced as like various types of media strategy that weren't writing, but sort of involved writing, like social media or like product development or user research. Like I learned all these different skills. Um, and so by the time I like launched the new modality, I'd really been sort of figuring out my stuff for like 15 years. Cause even when I had full-time jobs, I was working like nights and weekends on being
Yes.
a freelancer. I was like really determined to do it. I was like I got my first article in the Atlantic, literally writing like nights and weekends with a job in startup tech. That was like really wild. And the same for my first article in Vice. Um, so yeah, it's like I really it's hard. Like I definitely have moments where I'm just like, oh my God, do I still believe in myself? Like what just like especially right now because like having a newborn is so intense and having a broken engagement is so intense and for a lot of reasons that are like complicated my broken engagement and a lot of the drama around it was extremely public and that's been like really hard also and just like dealing with all of the different elements of it um I've definitely had moments where I'm just like, wow, maybe this is it. Like maybe my dreams are just done. Like and those have been like really, really tough moments. And I had some of those also when I like went through what I think of as my sellout period when I started working in startups. Um, which was when I like moved to San Francisco and I mean I wanted to live in San Francisco because I love the Bay Area and I love the culture but also a lot of it was just about trying to make more money and just being like I'm not going to
Sure.
try to do this as like because before I moved to San Francisco Bay Area which was like 2013 I was really really trying to only have my income come from writing and it just wasn't happening. Like, it was
Yeah.
such a major time of transition for the industry. I was like kind of figuring it out, but not really. I was really stressed out. I was really anxious all the time. I had a horrible life-threatening accident in 2011 where I broke my neck. And then after that, I was just like, oh my God, I need a job with health insurance. Like, what am I going to do? And so that was kind of when I went into tech. And I went through a few years then where I was just like, maybe I'm done. Like, maybe I'm just never going to work in media again. But then it all like came back around. It was actually a really cool story of like the obstacles are detours in the right direction thing, where it was like I went into startup tech, and then the niche that I ended up carving out in startup tech was like a media and technology like niche. And I wouldn't be able to do the kind of work that I do now, like all the media strategy and stuff, and have been able to start my own publication and everything, and have about building like healthier social media if I didn't have that experience. So
Yeah. I look throughout the last 3 years, I've had some odd jobs here and there. Right now, as a side gig, I am working in a hockey arena, like for like an NHL for an NHL team.
mhm.
That's my side gig. When I'm not doing that, I'm making a show for a client right now. I do video.
Mhm.
I do a lot of video stuff, right? Because again, podcast, big mouth, creating a niche for myself that way. That seems to be where my income's coming from right now. Um, but the thing about it is, right, I learned this, like, I knew going in this was going to be a process. I'm gonna go ups and downs. I'm gonna let myself be open
Yeah.
to what my skills are going to lead me to, right? Now, I enjoy the hockey team job, but I want to get away from it because I don't want to do that kind of work anymore. Like long term, I just don't, right? So now I'm just like take my skills here, see what I can get in other things, right? Maybe become a producer, just someone that creates different media content for other networks. Maybe I work for like, well, I guess a radio network or some kind of like television thing down the road,
Yeah.
right? Because I have the skills for it. Like like what I've learned here, will definitely can be useful there, and maybe that can reinforce for when I do go back out. Like this is a process. It's not.
Right. You get so
It's
much material there too.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's like one of those things where it's just like I've learned a lot about how to create a show. So I've learned a lot how to do things. But even so, I've come to the conclusion that if the price is right, yeah, I go get a job again. But it has to be the right job at this
Yeah.
point in time, right? It's not, I don't think it's giving up on my dreams. If I'm still doing the creative stuff I want to do, but I'm doing it for a big company or who cares, right? Even a startup, like I don't mind startups as well. Like, why not? Right? Why not? Right? It doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that what we freelance for two reasons. One, we think we're worth something, right? The other reason we do it though is you had a dream that you wanted to write or be a certain kind of person your whole life. So the journey we are both going on in our own ways is, am I the person I imagine myself to be? And hopefully the answer will be no, you're better. Right? So, right? That's the hope, right? Because I think sometimes, I think this is the one thing I've learned as a freelancer is we have a tendency to sell ourselves short. Sometimes we must to do whatever to pay the bills. But the truth is, in our heads, is are we really what we think we are? Sometimes that's the mind fuck you fight with as a freelancer. That's the real mind fuck. Everything else, the jobs that suddenly disappear, the yeses but the nos, the where is my payment, you mother, like none of that shit, none of that shit. Like that's just you learn to become tough to that. But the real battle like, each and every day is what I'm doing worth it? Am I worth it? And that's what you have to kind of prove to yourself doing this. Now, if you can believe in it, if you can believe in that person, in that self, doors will open. That's what I truly believe. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to be freelancing forever. Like one of the things I realized too is I may have to get a real job again. Son of a bitch, right? Right. But at the same time, if I'm doing what I'm doing for a big company or a small company, but I'm still doing what I want to do, does it matter? No,
Yeah,
right?
one of the cool experiences I had when I was doing more freelance in like the tech world was God, when was this? I guess this was maybe 5-ish years ago now. Uh man. But I during sort of my time in startups, I got really involved, obviously. Well, I was already kind of involved in the like San Francisco art and like hacker community, but I also got involved in kind of the broader tech community. And there's a social club called the Battery in San Francisco, which was founded by a couple of tech millionaires who are like super interested in the arts. And they have this great like creative in residence program. And so at one point, years ago, I forget how this connection even got made, but they were starting a magazine and they were like, we want to do the New Yorker of San Francisco. And I was like, cool. I think about the New Yorker of San Francisco all the time, like what that concept would look like, you know?
Yeah.
And so they hired me to be the sort of to like get it off the ground. And I ended up doing 5 issues for them. And that was really, I mean, it was cool because I actually really like the Battery. I really like the membership. I really like the founders. They're super interesting people. And doing a magazine that was like capturing that, it was like kind of like content marketing, but honestly, it was like the highest end, most subtle content marketing you could like possibly
Yeah.
imagine. And a lot of the journalism that we were doing was like real stuff, like arts and culture journalism in the Bay Area. And the thing that I realized after that was like they had paid me to learn how to make a print magazine,
Yes.
which is like no one ever gets that opportunity. Like I didn't understand how rare it was when it first came across my desk. And then once I was in it, I did like the 5 issues of the Battery magazine, and by the end of that, I was like a pro at making a physical magazine. And most people who start magazines, like if you're starting a magazine, you're generally doing it on like a shoestring budget. Like most people aren't paid for the first few years, like a lot of the time. And so that was one of the moments where I was just like, oh right, like this whole sort of like tech thing actually ended up putting me right back in media in this funny way. And like
Yeah.
um yeah, it was awesome. I mean, and I'm still like it's also like a very concrete example. I feel like I have a lot of examples from my work history also of like this particular situation put me in touch with this community or this like world and taught me things about that world. And the Battery was definitely one of those where like I'm still in touch with that community even though I'm not doing their magazine anymore. I still have like a residency there. Um and that's really cool and helpful. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Eh,
Just like trying to be open and get out there and hustle.
yeah.
I feel like hustling is like the skill that's so hard to learn because so much of it is what you're talking about, like learning to believe in yourself. Um, but it's also it just takes so much time and energy, and like you just really have to wake up in the morning and just be like, am I going to go to another meetup? And I am I going to make more phone calls? Like, is this really going to happen? Can I do this today? You know? It takes more energy, like it takes more like willpower than most of the other things I've done, I would say.
So this is how I create it. This is how I equate this. Are you ready? It's
Hmm.
pro wrestling, and
Uh-huh.
I'm talking. So you are old enough to remember this. So so back when WWF was in like the early '90s, late '80s, right? Not so much the wrestling on TV. My favorite stuff was the interviews behind the scenes, right? They
Uh-huh.
would actually go, WWF is coming to this arena at this time, at this place, and you need to be there now. My guest at this time, he will be taking on such and such. And they would bring someone in. Now, my favorite was Macho Man Randy Savage. Now,
Mhm.
if you sit there and think about it, it's the dumbest thing ever. You see these grown men dressed in these elaborate costumes talking about how they're going to kick somebody's ass in this place at this time to be there. But the really good ones believed in it. Like this is the thing. Like this is actually hustling 101. is, okay, yes, he's wearing the most elaborate costume. There's this one problem I love. It's called Cream of the Crop, where he showed up with these coffee creamers. He was just passing them to the guy interviewing him, and it was the dumbest thing I've ever saw. But there
Mhm.
is some truth in that. Like, it was entertaining, but there was an authenticity to it as well. There was a part of him that believed in that, right? Something he bought in at some point, right? There's a buy-in,
Interesting.
right? Well,
That's
because
so
you have,
interesting too, because pro wrestling is like the example of fake entertainment a lot of the time, but you're right, there is something authentic there.
well,
That's
no,
so
because, okay,
interesting.
so now we're not going to go into, like, politically speaking, I call myself a moderate. I have things I like
Mhm.
on both sides, so that makes
Mhm.
me a unicorn in this day and age. So, because I don't like playing for any team,
Yeah.
but right, but I've interviewed politicians before. Okay, and the thing that you have to understand about interviewing a politician is this: to a degree, they have to buy their own bullshit. They have to. And the reason they have to do it is simple. They're not going to be able to convince you of anything if they're not convinced themselves. That makes sense, right?
I have also observed this, yeah.
Yeah, right. That makes sense. That also means interviewing them's a bitch, because you have to get through that. To find a human being sometimes in that is a very difficult process. I gotta get paid for that. It's not something I will do for free, because it's a pain in the ass. But but I understand, because you need that. Again, I'm not bullshitting you. You can tell you're entertained a little bit by some of the ways I've put things, right? Right, because it's real. I'm not trying to be anything I'm not. So now, if someone else said these words but tried to say them this way, it wouldn't work. But because it's me, and same with you, when you go out there and put yourself out there, there is only one Lydia Laurenson. That's it. And the real product you are selling at the end of the day is not your expertise, your writing, your editing, all these cool things you've done. It's you, right? That's the secret, right? So
Yeah,
what
another really piece of good like a really good piece of advice I got, and this sort of accorded with my experience when I heard this piece of advice, but it getting this advice sort of more concretely from a successful writer helped me, like, crystallize it in my own mind. And what she told me, this was Gail Sheehy, who died a little while back, but she was a very successful writer in her day. And one of the things she told me that I like fully believe is she was like, your top priority are the stories that you can write that no one else can.
Yep.
Like, make that your top priority, and it's not going to pay as well as the other stuff at first. That's the thing about it. It's like you have to like actively prioritize the stuff that only you can do. um and it's hard because, like, obviously the stuff that's going to pay more is the stuff where there's, I don't know, there's like lots of people lining up to do it. There's like a business need for it generally,
Mhm.
right? Or something like that. And a lot of the time the stuff that only you can do is stuff that only you would come up with, which means that you need to get other people to believe in it. Like, someone isn't going to come to you and be like, usually, like, someone isn't going
No,
to come to you and be like,
I
only
got
you can write this
I got a great
story.
example of this. I'm offering, like, an advertising business right now, like an idea for an advertising for creatives, because I think there's two ways to market a book, really, which is talk about the book, but the long game, the real long game, is also to talk about yourself, because the goal
Yeah.
of every author should be, you look at the cover of the book. Okay, I'm going to assume you read Brandon Sanderson. I'm going to make that assumption. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I'm going to assume you're going to you read it. Now, if you look at his books, you look at his
I
book.
actually haven't, but I probably should.
Okay, no, it's fair enough. But you know who he is, right?
Yeah,
That's the
yeah.
point.
He's a
Like,
fantasy author,
okay,
right? Yeah.
yeah. So if you look at his books, okay, his name is on top, and then it's the book, right?
Yeah,
Now,
that's
when
what
the
you want.
author, that's what every author should want. So if an author's smart, they shouldn't just be advertising their book in the moment. They should be advertising themselves, at least a little bit. Not, it doesn't have to be over the top cheesy, but hey, this is me. What's the common denominator in all these books? You, right? So I'm good. I think I'm good at building people up, right? But again, you tell an author to again, that confidence to advertising. Okay, here I am, world. I'm awesome. I mean, that doesn't sound like that sounds like I made that sound even faker than it actually sounds on purpose, right? But same
Yeah.
idea. It's like you have to have a little bit of that to sell something, to hustle anything. Otherwise, no one's going to believe you. That's kind of like the real challenge. So I think I'm good at that stuff, but trying to get people to necessarily to go in and do this initially has been hard because it's like, well, it's a good idea, but how am I going to do a Facebook ad, or how am I going to do this, or how am I going to do it? It's part of the process. So now I do this enough times, get enough people to go, hey, this really, really works. Well, suddenly that might augment to something else. Maybe I don't do it this way. Maybe I have to modify. I mean, that's the other thing too. I maybe have to work on getting better at it as well. But even so, trying to figure out your niche is what it comes down to. And everybody's got their niches. What do I do well? Right. And being honest about it. And because if you're trying to go with what everybody else is doing, okay, I've interviewed uh, someone like Natasha Ralph, yourself. You've been doing this for 20 years. Now, I do have a resume, but let's say I wanted to go in for the same thing you got. Well, they know you, right? They know you can deliver. Look at me. Who the fuck is that guy? Right? And that's the way it is. So who are they more likely to hire? The person they know. But if I create a niche that's unique to me, well, this is really cool. They might still say, who the fuck is that guy? But I might be the only game in town.
Yeah, it's really interesting how hard a lot of writers find the business of writing. Like, I wouldn't say that I found it easy, but I've realized over time that I seem to have an easier time with business than the vast majority of writers. That was a really interesting moment. Like, some of my friends have said that I have like a head for business. It's sort of an
Mhm.
old-fashioned phrase. Um, but that was like that was part of why I ended up starting a magazine actually, was like because at some point, once I realized how few people have the media skills and the writing skills and the business skills, I was like, oh, there just aren't that many people who can like create platforms that promote other people, like ways for other writers to get started. That's like a rare skill set. And then
Yes, it
once I
is.
started realizing that, I felt like I had more of a responsibility to like raise up other writers, especially because like the mainstream media has its own thing going on, and I really wanted to do something that was like elevating a different community. And that's been really interesting to um I think a lot of people experience the switch as they get older of like, how do I elevate other talent, younger talent, especially? Like, how do I make it easier for other people and not just myself? Like, especially freelancing. Like, when I think about the things that took me so long to learn and figure out and do in my 20s as a freelancer, like in some ways the ground has changed, but in some ways it's still the same. Um
It's more the
and
same in
like
some ways, I'm sure.
yeah, like I remember one thing that I did during the beginning of the pandemic that I still feel really good about was like my magazine. So I had launched the new Modality right before the pandemic. So I did this big Kickstarter, and then the pandemic hits, and we're literally in production. And then my art director, who's like my main partner on this project, she was pregnant at the time, and she gave birth 3 weeks early. So we're just like, oh my God, are we still going to be able to do this? And we did it. We managed to get out the first issue. I mean, a lot of our other plans were derailed, but we did manage to get out the first issue, for which I'm still like amazed at us for doing. Um, and I'm still really proud of it. People can still buy it. If you go to the newmodality.com, you'll like learn more about the whole thing. But like, it was it was such a hard time because all these big publications out in the world lost all of this ad revenue. And so
Yes.
they were shutting down a bunch of their like payments to other, and one of the first communities that took the hit was freelancers, right? So all
Absolutely.
these huge publications, like everyone, like the Atlantic, the New York Times, the Washington Post, everyone just starts defaulting on their payments to freelancers at the beginning of the pandemic. And I was seeing this happen, and I didn't have any outstanding payments that were due to me because I had been starting Numo and I hadn't been like writing freelance. But I was just like, oh my God. Like I was like, I can't believe they're doing this. Like, but I mean, it made complete sense from their perspective, like a business perspective or whatever, if you're one of these
Yeah.
big corporations. But I was just like, oh my God, you guys, like, this is like the population that can afford this the least. And one of the things that I was able to do that made me really happy was I just moved up the payment schedule for everyone that I was paying at Numo. Like the
Yeah.
contract said that we weren't going to pay them until publication, which is normal. But I was just like, okay, like I have the money right now. Like
Mhm.
we'll figure it out. Like just like invoice me and I'll pay you right now, even though we're still in production. Um, and I feel like a lot of those moments are the moments that stick with me, like as like what makes it worth it, you know? Like just
Yeah.
like, okay, I had this moment when I could get $1,000 to this writer. Um,
Yeah.
and it was like months before they expected to get it at a time that they were in need. You know, it's funny. Like, but I think if when you've been a freelancer and you've been in the trenches, you really feel that, right? Like you're like I was
Oh yeah.
imagining myself as a freelancer, just like having all these checks get defaulted and just being like, oh my God, what am I going to do in the middle of this like unprecedented disaster? Unprecedented in our lifetimes. Obviously, pandemics are precedented sort of more broadly, but none of us had lived through one before.
Yeah.
So, or I guess
Yeah.
we the HIV pandemic, but that's different.
Yeah. Okay. I will say I wish we had done some things from the HIV pandemic better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, pandemics are like that.
Well, no, I think the big thing. Okay, so for me, this is just because again, I am just old enough to remember this. So this is like a back in my day, shut up, clouds kind of moment. I I think one of the biggest things about this pandemic I did not like was how media covered it. If you compare it to
Oh
the
my God.
HIV, if you
Yeah.
if you if you compare it to how HIV was covered. Now, don't get me wrong, there were a lot of things about the HIV pandemic, and we repeated some of those mistakes, especially towards the end. But um, the one thing I thought that was actually really good, but Reagan kept people calm, right? That was the one thing I thought he did well. Now the rest, there's a lot of other things you can say, whatever you want, but he kept people calm. I think it's partly because of how media has evolved today to some degree, but I also think it's the panic, even now, post. I'm not gonna say like COVID's still there. It's going to be there for the next few years at least, right? Everything I'm reading, it's a lot milder now. It probably will stay this mild going forward. Fantastic. That doesn't mean COVID isn't going to exist for the future, right? What it means though is, but the effects of the how things were campaigned for the first 2 years, especially, I'm still hearing the rhetoric verbatim to this day, and I'm gonna hear it for at least a couple more years.
It was wild. I mean, the whole thing was just
Yeah.
like such a disaster.
Oh, no,
Like,
totally,
like
totally.
the media coverage, I agree. The Brookings Institution had a really good report that was extremely intellectually honest. I thought I was actually a bit surprised about how intellectually honest it was, but they published a report in Brookings is like a think tank in Washington, and they published a report in late 2020 where they were looking at the types of misinformation that both political sides believed. It was like different misinformation, like both
Yeah, oh,
sides
yeah.
believed different misinformation. And
Oh,
that was one of the things that I liked about their report was like they weren't just talking about one side. They were like, no, this is the type of error that this side makes, and this is the type of error that this side makes. And I was like, I actually got a lot out of reading that report because I
yo,
had
no, no,
definitely been making some of the errors, and I had just like at that point in my personal political evolution, I was more on the right wing.
mhm.
And part of why I ended up there was because I was so mad at sort of a lot of the left narratives around COVID. But then, like, reading this report, I realized I was like looking at some of the stuff where they were like, and here's the type of errors that people on the right wing tend to make. And I was like, oh my gosh, because I wasn't even thinking of myself as like on the
Oh,
right
sure.
wing yet. When I read this, I was still like, oh, I'm basically a normal liberal. And then I'm like looking at it and I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like now sufficiently reading right wing media and on the right wing that I'm starting to make some of these like starting to have some of these blind spots that people on that side have. So then I was like starting to correct back towards the center.
Well,
But I didn't see anyone else do that. I only saw this one report from Brookings, which I thought was really good.
so the pandemic's big lesson to me. I have what I call my 10 rules of success. So it gave me rule 9, which is this: be detached from all outcomes. Jocko Willink was the one who originally quote, but it's actually, I think, one of the best. So here's the thing, okay?
That's a
We're
very
not gonna
common
go.
rule for like personal development programs too.
Well,
Yeah.
no, it's okay. But here's the thing. This, and you understand this because you've been in media. What we sell are ideas more than anything else. Is what we sell as ideas. Now, human
Mm-hmm.
nature is such that once we attach ourselves to an idea completely, it is very hard to change anybody's mind because now we've associated the idea with ourselves, right? So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that you believe that the sky is purple. I'm not saying you do, but let's just for the sake of argument. Now, the sky could really be blue. But if you so attached to the idea that the sky is purple, nothing I say is going to convince you. Nothing. So if you get people attached to an idea, people will never change their mind, no matter what facts, no matter what you present to them, they will not change. You will not change. Right? Because we all have ideas we really attach ourselves to. We're all guilty of this to some degree. And honestly, we need to. We have standards, ideals, these things. This is part of who we are. But in recognizing that, right, we have to detach ourselves from the outcomes. Because if we can do that, right, as much as we can, there's always a chance we acknowledge that we can be wrong, first and foremost. No matter what the idea is, we could be wrong. The second thing, and this is the most crucial thing, now if I go after your ideas, I'm not attacking you personally anymore. I'm just attacking the idea, which is what I was doing all along. But because you're able to detach and I'm able to detach, I can listen to what you're saying with a clearer head. I still may disagree with you when it's over, but it will no longer be, well, you're spouting misinformation because you're an anti-vaxxer, or you're spouting misinformation because you're a sheeple. None of that shit. It's just like, I understand where you're coming from. I disagree. And everybody walks away. Does that make sense?
I find meditation really helpful for this.
Yeah,
I don't
yes.
I don't know if have you ever done like any program like Landmark Forum or anything?
No, not program stuff. I still do.
Yeah.
I pray, but I mean that's just like
Yeah.
my own thing, right?
Yeah,
So
no. Meditation and prayer, I feel like, are like the baseline things. Yeah. You might, I don't know. Landmark's tricky. I try not to recommend it too much because, like,
no, it's fair.
well, they have like a hard sell that's like baked into the program, and that hard sell is like actually really annoying and
Okay,
terrible.
gotcha,
Like it's
gotcha.
really awful. So that means that like if you're recommending Landmark, you then have to be like, but by the way, this hard sell really sucks, and I'm so sorry. Like if you go through it, you're gonna have to deal with that. But the program, I think, has a lot of like really good sort of like Jedi mind tricks for helping you see your own blind spots and work on your stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah, but like meditation and prayer, like spiritual practice for me is like the baseline of all of this. Like, I don't know how, I mean, I think I got really into it in my early 30s and I had a lot of drive before that. So I don't like, I clearly don't like need it to do anything, but it's so helpful. Like,
I
man,
okay, so if you don't mind my asking, I'm going to say it like this: what's your faith? What do you believe in?
that is a good question. I've written about this a bit. I have a website, edencircle.net, which is just like, that's kind of my website for stuff that doesn't fit into any of my other
That
projects
it,
right now.
did I get that right?
Eden Circle without the S.
Okay. Okay.
Uh, it's like
Um,
a weird little. It's a weird little project. I basically was like, I just want a place where I can put text on the internet that doesn't like do anything else. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
EdenCircle.net. And like I've sort of written about spirituality there a few times. Um I would say that I'm really into direct experience. That's like my main thing. Like I'm trying to have really strong direct experience of the divine or whatever you want to call it, the mystery, God, all of these things. And
Yeah.
I I work a lot on epistemics, like spiritual epistemology, like how do I know what I know? That this is like one of my main area of interests and has been for like god, something like 8 years, 7 years. So that I guess if in as much as I identify with a faith, I was raised in Unitarian Universalism, which is like a super weird little independent religion that is but I think a lot about other faiths as well. Like I try to be very respectful and I've been on this big like kick with Christianity recently. I've been like doing Psalm 23 a lot. Um
Yes, it is.
that's been really helpful. So yeah,
No, I got you. I'm still very much. I'm still very much. I grew up Christian. I still have a Christian faith. Um, I try to simplify it because I interview lots of people on the show, and I realize that everybody's got their own kind of walk. So I just kind of let people. I've always wanted this place to feel like that people could be themselves, right? Not that I'm going to judge you for what you do or don't believe in, because frankly, in the grand scheme of things, it's not my concern. It's yours, right? But but at the same time, I mean, I do have my beliefs and kind of where I stand for. And for I think everybody that kind of goes down this path on some form or fashion, like you're still looking for, sounds to me like you're looking for your own answers. That's where you've been and it's where you've been at for a while. That's is that fair to say?
maybe.
Yeah. If there's a better way to put it, by all means. I'm not trying to come to this magical conclusion. But basically, like whether you believe in God, the divine, the universe, or whatever you want to call it, what tends to happen with I think a lot of people in this kind of realm is we all have these moments in life when we just see how big the world is compared to us. And when we have that experience, you cannot unsee it anymore. It's one of those like little um one of the things about the truth, like I'm not talking in terms like a definitive, but just the fact that you see that there's more to life out there, you cannot unsee it. You can't deny it once you see it. And once you get to that point, then you go on a different journey. Like maybe you're like, well, I'm not sure I buy everything in this book or this book or this book or this book, but they're all talking about some of these same things. So there's an answer, something out there. What is it? Right? And I think that's the Rob Bell said this best. The people that don't believe in anything said this is all there is. But to everyone that has a kind of a spirituality, their belief is that there is more. There is something more. There is something out there. And that's universally grounded. What that is, we might debate that till the cows come home. Right.
I've
But
known atheists who like really have that, which is really it's really important to me to kind of acknowledge that.
yeah,
Like um yeah, it's really like my stepmother is an atheist. She's a scientist and she like really has this. Like she does
yeah,
science, she does physics so that she can like learn more about the limits of knowledge, you know?
yeah,
Um and yeah, it's so one of my one of my good friends died last year. His name was Peter, and I have an obituary for him on Eden Circle because he was such an influence on me and I like loved him so much. But he was an atheist too, and he was so good. Like he was such a good person.
yeah,
In ways that I didn't even know a lot of them until he died. Like it was just like he gave away a huge amount of his income, like a huge
yeah,
percentage of his income. Like he was so generous and supportive to people around him. like he's had multiple memorials. There are like more coming up because so many people just like loved him. And his first memorial was like standing room only, like all of these people, and a lot of us having these conversations with each other and just being like, how is it possible that he had the energy to like emotionally support so many people? You know, it was
Yeah.
like he was really present, he was really available. He also had like difficult job, like all these things. So yeah, it's I just kind of want to know like what the universe is. I feel like that's like a big
That's
part
so,
of it for me. I'm
and
just like,
that's
what is going on? Like, what is this?
no, I understand. I'll tell you the only thing there's one thing that truly bothers me about atheism. What I've seen about it, because and that is the lack of doubt.
Yeah, totally.
Be,
Well, it's like it becomes a dogma, like any other
no,
dogma.
no,
And then you're just like, what am I? You're just like, why are you?
no, no,
It's
no.
so terrible. Yeah.
Well, no, no. I think actually it's the one thing that bothers me, because there are agnostics that don't believe in anything out there either, but they're open to the possibility. It's like, I don't think so, but okay, there might be. I'll acknowledge that, right? Christian, I doubt. I have my moments of doubt, right? There are people there are people all these different faiths and walks of life. There's these moments of doubt, and what I realized, and something I realized in this life, and we're going back to self belief a little bit too. Doubt's a good thing sometimes, because with doubt, it forces you to examine again your ideas, your self worth, yourself. Like, even in just like small, like if I have doubts about, is my idea a good idea? Maybe it is a good idea, but I'm doing something wrong. If I didn't doubt, I wouldn't be able to explore that honestly, right?
Yeah,
But
you
if
have
you
to be
don't,
able to self-correct, right?
yeah, exactly. I think doubt is one of the most important. It's a super crucial thing. It's super crucial, right? Because without a little bit of doubt, you can't be calm. Like, the person that terrifies me the most is not the person with doubts. It's the person with no doubts, because because that person will just go, and there is no stopping them. That what they are so convinced in their idea that, like, that stuff's dangerous. Like, what the hell is, like, nothing? No doubts? I think that's what's all I realized. I came to this realization about 5 years ago. I have a buddy who's an atheist too. His name's Eric. And he's one of legitimately sweet kid. He plays, he tries to be a prick on purpose. But I also saw him with he had a brother who had this incredibly rare condition, like super rare. The brother was going to have a very short life. When you saw that guy around his brother, you literally saw one of the most, I'm not even bullshitting, angelic people I've ever seen. The patience, the grace, the mercy, the kindness, the love that generated from him in that time when I saw him, unbelievable. Like, that is like just an amazing dude, right? Like, just incredible. Now, anyone else? There's one of my buddies. He took pleasure in tormenting. He just had that little bit of that in him. But he had these amazing qualities. And then his brother died, and it wrecked him for a long time, because he really loved his brother, and and I cannot stress enough. Like, yeah, some of the best people I've ever met in my life don't believe in anything, and that's fascinating to me too. It shows something that I can learn from. But I always worry. I always worry when I look at them too. It's like, you don't have any doubts, and I'm not sure that's a good thing. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's it. That's it. That's it. But I will say, so I'm going to ask this, and then we'll I don't know how much more time you got. So I want to ask this question before you go, because you had to have a moment when the universe got bigger on you. So I am curious. I will tell you what. I'll share my experience if you share yours. What was yours?
Well, there's been a bunch.
Yeah, that's
But
right. What's the one that made you go, okay, I can't deny
I
this
can't
anymore?
unsee this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually have a piece on edencircle.net about this. It's but the sort of short version is that in 2016 or so, I had like a major spiritual awakening experience where I went from like essentially being an agnostic to believing in God or something that corresponds to that
Yeah.
word, right? It's like, and it was like very experiential. It was like observable, right? I think that's one of the things that doesn't quite register for a lot of people who aren't into this stuff is how much of it can be experiential, how much of it you can just experience and observe. Like that's part of why that's why I'm so into epistemology. It's like I care about the study of knowledge. I want to know how we know things because it's like what in our cognitive experience is real and what isn't is like the question to me.
Yes.
So yeah, I just had this huge spiritual experience. And I had like, previous to that, I had like done a lot of different things. I'm really into sort of like cognition and consciousness. So like I had done a lot of like wild mind bending things. I'd tried a lot of different substances. I had like traveled. I had like done all these different things. But then in 2016, I was like, oh my God, whatever just happened to me outclasses every other cognitive experience I have ever had. And it has shown me God as a phenomenon in the world. And like, I was totally sober. I was just like, what is that? How do I figure that out? And like, of course, the answer is like, you don't figure it out. You spend like, if you're interested in it, then like you spend your life thinking about it and then you die. Like maybe then you figure it out. But it's like, yeah, I mean, I think about that experience a lot, in part because I think a lot about what it means to get people interested in this stuff. Because I have, especially because I have kind of a predilection personally for like romantic partners who are materialists, like not who are not into spirituality, who don't believe in God, often who have a lot of contempt for it. Like this just seems to be like a type of guy that I go for. Um,
Okay.
and that has led to a lot of like frustration and pain in my personal relationships in the last 10 years or whatever, like 7ish years. But like it's also led to a lot of like growth and interesting conversations. And
Sure.
I a lot of the time I really come up against this question a lot of like, what would it mean to give this person this experience that I've had? Because I'm a lot of time because I'm even just curious about what they would make of it. Like I'm like, would you still believe the things that you believe if you had seen and experienced what I've experienced? Um or would you not, right? Like
I
would you
I
sort of like shift in the same way that I did? And it's like an interesting question.
I have an answer for you, but you might not like it. It's a warning. So this is just so there are things out there, you are aware of this, that are bigger than you and you can see them.
Right.
But the big thing you possess, and the reason why it doesn't make you go crazy, is you are open minded enough to acknowledge that it's out there. On some levels, even prior to this moment, you were getting ready to see these things.
Right. Yeah, that is for sure true.
You're okay. So because you have that open mindedness, you're ready for that. Someone that does not have an open mind, the risk, this goes back to what I said earlier about being attached to your ideas, right? Now, if you're confronted with something that goes completely contrary to your ideas, and you're so attached to them that you will cling to it, even if it shatters you,
Right.
right? I I speak from experience here. I
Yeah.
do speak.
Well,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, I think everyone who gets into this stuff has that kind of experience of just being like broken on the wheel of your ideas. You kind of invite that
yeah.
in,
But
right? You kind of have to.
yeah, no, no. Okay, if you're ready, but if you're open minded, but what if you're not? And this is here's the thing: they'll still shatter the same way you did. But they're not, but they may reject it completely. And if they do, this is what happens. Now they're being forced to deal with something they're not ready to deal with. Because no, this is the thing about that. You can't deny what you see. Whether you want to or not, it's always going to be in the back of your mind until you deal with it. It's like any kind of it's almost like giving someone a trauma. Because
Yeah,
what you've done, right? It's almost like giving someone a trauma.
I've
So
observed this. Yeah, I've observed what you're talking about.
yeah, so so when you see, so they may if they're open minded, if they're so this is the only thing I'm gonna say with extreme caution. They have to have an open enough mind to go through an experience like that. And sometimes the reason they don't is because they're not. So the world doesn't give them that experience, right? The question is, well, if there is a God, why doesn't he show himself? Sometimes
Right,
the
of
answer to
course.
that question, sometimes the answer to that question is some people, if they saw God, would just chatter in
Yeah,
ways.
or maybe God likes having atheists around and
I,
stuff
I,
like
I actually I, I actually I
God's
actually
like,
think
"I love
God does.
atheists."
No,
Yeah, right.
I actually think God does.
Right,
Um,
totally, they're great.
yeah. So, and also I think it's a good joke he plays on himself. That's my own whole thing there. But even so, there is, like, again, we all, and all of us have this, by the way, this is true with all of us. There's a capacity to handle certain things that we all have. And there are just some things we're just not built to deal with. We just aren't, right? I would not want to force somebody to deal with something they're not ready for, right? So
Yeah, and
yeah,
I've definitely seen that, like I said,
yeah,
like, I've seen people like, there's a lot of cases of people having various types of spiritual experiences and having psychotic breaks. I've written about this, I've done interviews about this. I mean, it's terrifying, and
yeah.
especially when you double down on spiritual practice the way I've done, you really have to acknowledge that you may start going crazy, like legitimately crazy,
Oh
not like
yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
fake crazy. And that's true of a lot of the experiential paths. It's like meditation retreat centers often field people with like major tragic outcomes, like psychedelics, all of this stuff. One of the things I've gotten really interested in because I'm interested in this other stuff is community mental health support for this reason. Because I find like the mental health world as we constitute it in like our culture right now pretty unsatisfying from a spiritual perspective. And a lot of the time, like, there's like more effective mental health support to be found in my experience from like community organizations that are normally serving people who like take a lot of psychedelics or something.
Yeah,
um so that's something I think about quite a bit, that like any spiritual paradigm is effectively a mental health paradigm, like any religious paradigm, like all of it. And you kind of, if you're going to try to sort of like teach people things or help people do things or whatever, you need to have a plan if like something really intense happens to them. And you see it in a lot of small scale spiritual organizations too, in my experience. It's like whether they actually meet the definition of the word cult or not, like organizations where there are groups of people working out their spiritual stuff together, like there are like wild outcomes from those organizations all the time.
yes,
And like for people in them, and like I really like at this point any organization like that that doesn't like really think about this and like have like ideas about it and like a plan and like ways of ways of trying to support people and like help people have guardrails around their experience and stuff. Um and any spiritual teacher who doesn't acknowledge that that's a real thing and like think about it and like put a lot of time into thinking about it, like I'm just like, this is like the thing that you have to be responsible about if you're going to be doing this stuff.
oh,
um so
and all this is under the assumption they're saying yes, right? This is
right.
right, because this is the thing. This is even the best case scenarios, right? Right, even the best case scenarios, they're ready, they're willing, they're open. It might be mind blown. I promised I would tell you my experience, so I'm going to tell you mine. So I was starving. So I was working for an author in Arizona, and it didn't go well. And I was pretty angry for about a year, right? Not just for but just everything I had to do to survive. It had gotten to a point where I just couldn't do it anymore. I like physically I had been broken down. My teeth were falling out. I was
Wow.
starving, right? And I remember this is so the town is Sholo, Arizona. I don't know if you know where that is or not, but it's north. It's about 2-3 hours north of Phoenix. So I'm living there, and I'm walking home from a 7-Eleven, and I look up. I just happen to look up into like at the sun. I see like this shadow in the distance, and I know somehow it's coming for me, whatever that is. And I'm just like, well, that's something you don't like. And I knew that if it got to me, I wouldn't come back. Whatever it would take me, I wouldn't come back. So it was just like, oh, okay. So I just had that moment of clarity. That was the moment I realized that I could die. And that one day I will die. That shadow will come for me again, but it will be for me. Right? Not right. If I kept going down the path I was on, I would I would like I would be dead. And the interesting thing about that whole experience was there wasn't like a punishment if I had decided to keep going. The option was there. There wasn't going to be like, if you do this, you die, but we're not going to stop. Do you want to die? If you do, we'll let you go. You can keep going. It was just like one of those, whoa,
Yeah.
okay. Right. So I realized, it gave me the gift of realizing that we have no time and that all the things worthwhile to do in this life are now. And I've had this feeling ever since. And the pandemic creates like I'd say 10% of people are always going to wear masks. 10% of people are always going to remember this time in a very traumatic light for a very bunch of reasons, and that's fair. 80% of people are going to come back to some kind of equilibrium of normal. And then there's the other 10% who do crazier shit. I'm in that group because I did again. Every time I'm reminded that I don't have time, I just like, well, what else haven't I done? If that again, I might be crazy. I'm good with it. I'm
Mhm.
right. Life is too short. There you go. I hope I've been entertaining for you, Miss Lydia.
You have been. I would say one other thing about visions like the one that you are reporting or like experiences like that. I think a lot of spiritual people have moments like that of like one of the ways that I've heard it um, reported by a lot of people who have had moments like that. I've also, that wasn't my initial experience, but I have had moments like that of like having almost like a conversation with the universe and being like, do I stay or do I go? Basically. Um, and I feel like one of the things that I find helpful about those moments is the reminder of like the choice to be here.
Mhm.
Like, I'm here on purpose, no matter how hard it gets. Like, I can remind myself of that. And I definitely have moments where I'm still like, I'll just be like, oh my God, it's really hard for me to believe that I'm choosing this experience right now. Like, whoa, but I
Some
find it a
not.
reminder. Yeah.
I don't necessarily think we choose specific experiences. I just think this is how I see it. Life is an opportunity for us all, and we all are going to get certain experiences. Some of them will come to us very easily. Some of them not so easily. And I think, but no matter what, you get the decision. I think where the choice is I think more often than not how you choose to experience these moments. I think that's the real choice, right? Sometimes you can choose to go do stuff and the universe will let you. Sometimes you're going through stuff and there's nothing you can do about it. But no matter what, how do I see this moment? That is, and what do I do? Who am I going to be in these moments? I think honestly, when you get right down to it, that's all that matters. Got
Could
you
be.
thinking. Got you thinking over there.
Yeah, I am like uncomfortable with absolutes. So statements like that's all that matters. I'm like sort of automatically being like, like, but
There's a lot of freedom I'm getting in that, right?
mhm.
Even though I'm saying that's as a quote unquote absolute, there's a lot of freedom in that, right? It,
You would
the
probably really like Landmark Forum. I think it's
yeah,
in line with the philosophy that you're already sort of using.
yeah, yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Not to like be a shill for like
No,
also don't do it necessarily, but it's a really
yeah.
interesting program. Yeah.
So I gotta say, because I don't know how much more time we have. I feel like I've gotten a little extra out of you than intended anyway, going down this chat. I don't know how much more time you got left, but we probably should plug what you're doing at some point in this interview.
Oh yeah. Well, I guess the main things. So I mean, right now, mainly what I'm doing is taking care of a baby. Uh,
There's none. Hey, that's awesome,
it's
right?
real, and I
Yeah.
love it. I mean, it's honestly, it's so cool. Like it's like my situation is one that I never expected to end up in, and certainly didn't want to end up in. But now that now that I'm here, I feel like there's a lot of grace in the everyday. And yeah, well, so but I do want to there are still copies of the first issue of my magazine available. If you go to thenewmodality.com, you can read some articles from it. And there's like a link there that will help you buy copies. And at some point, I still intend to sort of blow that organization up bigger, kind of pivot it. The pandemic was a really intense time, and I spent a lot of it uncertain how to engage with the media ecosystem, and also going through a lot of personal transformations, like my engagement, that made me think about some sorts of things differently and sort of changed my media positioning in some ways. And so that's all been really, really like up in the air for a few years, but I still believe in that project, and I want to take it bigger and shift it around a little bit. So there's an email newsletter on the website. You can buy copies of the first issue. You can read some of the articles there that we originally published. And then a lot of my like more experimental writing is going up on edencircle.net. So I already plugged both of those things already, but
Yeah, but
and I like occasionally sell articles to publications and stuff, but I pretty much do that when I have like really specific reasons for wanting it to run in a particular place. Um, Especially my history as a blogger, because I had kind of a popular blog for a little while that was under a pseudonym, and I self-published some books and stuff, and that like really showed me a lot of the advantages of having control over my own website. Like, I mean, it's like a lot of my articles that are on publications websites. Like, I have an article on one website for a major publication. I won't name the publication because I don't want to embarrass them. But like, there was a funny moment at one point where I was like looking at that article because I was trying to remember something that I had cited in it. And I realized that the formatting had broken. This is a major publication. This is like
Mhm.
a famous, like, a line, and like the formatting had broken and the article was like unreadable after like a third of the way in. And so I like email my editor and stuff, but like stuff like that, it's like I really care about having some degree of control over a lot of my work. and you just give that away when you sell it. And there are reasons to do that, but that's part of what I love about independent publications, self-publishing, all of that, is it gives you the opportunity to like really develop your own voice, control your work, and have control over a lot of different dimensions of it, not just like the words, but like the presentation and stuff. Like what I love about the WordPress theme that I used for EdenCircle.net is like it's just text. It took me a while to find that theme. I had to really look for it. I was like, all I want is text on a website. How do I find this theme? Like, I don't want any of these other things. I don't want like gallery options. Like, I don't want sidebars. Like, I just want text, ideally Helvetica. Like, and I was like really excited when I found that theme. So that's where I'm at right now.
And so will you be more?
I also post Instagram a lot. Actually, people sometimes ask how they can like keep up with my stuff, and I'm like, well, I guess the social media platform that I post to the most is Instagram. So
what's your Instagram?
It's at Lydia Laurenson, LYDIALAURENSON, and it's the same on Twitter and like generally social platforms.
There you go, folks. Go check her out. Miss Lydia, I wish you the absolute best luck with your son. I hope you are engaged in the ultimate adventure. Right. So have a blast, and hopefully at some point sleep somewhere in the next 2 years. Beyond all that, when and if I take my show on the road, assuming you can escape the house, would you like to do this again?
Yeah. There's lots of great places to sit near me also.
I absolutely. But again, depending on your day, you might be like, so I'll tell you a fun little thing. I had an author, his son was 2 years old. Played him right there for the whole hour conversation, up until even after he needed his diaper change. So that
he was quiet?
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh yeah. You might get that. You might eventually get that. All right.
It's true.
Yeah, you might. Then again, I had another author.
He's quiet a lot of the time, to be fair, but he's also like young.
Yeah, but then you might get another one. I had another author, 3-year-old, has held the show hostage for 45 minutes. See, place in the universe kind of thing. I had no control over that, so I could have been upset about that, or I could have been just like, he's 3. What are you gonna do? Right. What do you gonna do? But yeah, no, I enjoyed chatting with you, and I'm gonna sign off the podcast. So for everybody watching, everybody listening, thank you for watching, thank you for listening. I was supposed to do this about a week ago. I'm glad I got to do this now. That all said, tonight, the guest I officially scheduled for today, Rob Multori, will be here later on tonight. So for everybody, tune in for that. But for everybody watching, everybody listening, thank you for watching, thank you for listening. Stay inspired, keep shining in the dark, and I'll see you guys next time.